call the Development Review Board meeting December the 19th to order. Some forward remarks. At the DRB, we hear applications for land development in the town of Brattleboro and appeals of zoning board administrator decisions. The Development Review Board operates on the record. Broadly, this means that we take a clear record of testimony from the applicant and any interested parties, and then issue a written decision with our findings relating about each application. The applicant and members of the public should be aware that this is your opportunity to comment and provide evidence relating to the application. In the event of an appeal of our decision to the Environmental Court, the court will not take additional evidence. But looks at the evidence from our hearings, the regulations, and determines if the evidence supports our decision. So I encourage all of you to speak up now at this hearing, because this is your opportunity to be heard. As we are on the record, we're going to ask that you affirm that your testimony will be truthful. So would any of the applicants and anyone wishing to speak to an application tonight please affirm the following oath, which I have here. If you'd like, just those who stand and make the following affirmation. I hereby affirm that the evidence I give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury. I do. Thank you very much. Just one other thing to point out tonight, that applicants require a majority vote of the full board to succeed. That's 4 members out of 7. We held the meeting a little bit so that we got 1 more member. We're 1 short for the first application, so if the applicant wishes to continue to his hearing or his application to a full board, then you can ask for a continuance. Otherwise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'd be looking for 4 out of 5. There's a few administrative issues before we start. We've got minutes from our previous meeting, December the 5th. I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the December 5th meeting.
So moved.
And seconded? Seconded, thank you. I have one question relating to these minutes before we vote on it. We continued Whetstone Station to January, and yes, neither of us or the clerk can't remember who proposed and seconded that continuance. Does anybody remember who did it? We can go back and look at the tape, but
I think I seconded it.
Was it Craig who made the motion? Probably Craig. Craig and James. Yeah. All right. Any other corrections to the minutes? All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Has the meeting been properly warned, Brian?
Yes, it has.
Do any members of the board wish to disclose conflicts of interest or ex-parte communications? Great. All right, with those formalities out of the way, then we'll open the review of all the public hearings, and I call application 2011-129, Michael Gooding. It's the second application, but you won't change it. Yeah. Michael, tell us about your application, please.
Well, we continued the site plan till this evening, which I believe you all have copies of. For the accessory apartment and neighborhood store. And I tried to answer all the questions that you asked of me the last time you were here.
So these are, you've got elevations at the end of the buildings? So end and front of the building, is that correct? So the Guildford Street side, you have a sign and a window into the store, am I right?
Yes.
And then, I guess it's to the west, we have an entrance into the store and some windows on the front of the building.
Correct.
And then you're showing an apartment in the existing space.
Yes.
Just to remind me, in your prior application, you had talked about extending that structure to add an apartment, but now it's
consolidated.
it's now incorporated inside that structure.
Oh, that's what it was, okay.
Okay, and I presume the consequence of that is the store is now smaller.
Yes.
Is it a 50-50 split or approximately? It looks like
It's pretty close to that, yeah. The apartment's just a little bit bigger.
Does this, the door that shows on your diagram serve both the store and the apartment?
Yes. It'll open up into a foyer area, and then there'll be an apartment on one side, store on the other.
okay. So there's no overall change to the. You haven't changed the exterior dimensions of that structure, that building.
Not at all.
Did parking change at all?
I'm using existing.
The existing
pavement.
parking spaces.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us a little bit about the lighting plan for this site?
Well, I'd emailed Brian today a light fixture that I was proposing to use on the signage. And
That's this picture.
that's that there, yeah. And on the side of the building where the doors and the windows are, the roof actually overhangs there 4 feet. So I'm proposing putting recessed lighting in the overhang to light the doorway in the front of the building.
So on the Guildford Street side, you're proposing two downcast lights like this?
Just one.
Just one.
Just one.
So a single downcast light over the store sign.
Yeah. Should be plenty. It's just a 6 square foot sign.
Okay, and you talked about lighting the eaves.
On the driveway view of the building, the roof overhangs on that side by 4 feet.
Yep.
So I'm gonna put some recessed lighting in that area, the overhang area, to light the entrance and walkway through the building.
And those lights will be what type of lights are those? They're just
Fluorescent.
fluorescent tubes.
Yeah. Fluorescent tubes, yeah.
But nothing will hang down below the,
It'll all be within the.
all flush with that
Correct.
eaves.
Yeah.
So somebody driving up Guildford Street won't directly see the lights, but they'll see the downcast of the light shining from under the eaves.
Yeah.
And those lights will be on when the store is open?
Yes.
Okay. So I can't put it with this as well.
What about access to the apartment after store hours?
As far as lighting.
Having a light over the
Well,
door.
one light over the doorway would be
Is
an
it?
outside light.
There is an outside light already over the door?
I've proposed probably 5 fixtures. One of them would be on a switch and the other 4 would be on a switch, so that during the store hours, they all could be on. During the off hours, just for the doorway itself of the apartment, just one fixture would be on.
tell me about you say 5 fixtures. I mean, one I can understand.
Well, the
You-
building's 48 feet long, so I figured on,
That's this,
dividing the space up and putting five lights in.
this facing
Okay, is it necessary to put lights over the, on the apartment side?
Not necessary, I was only thinking about, the driveway, if there's...
Because
There was a concern last time I was here about lighting and not having enough lighting, so, I mean, I would put as many or as few as necessary.
will there be parking in front of the apartment? There's parking in front of the store.
Yes,
is
if
there-
you look
is
at the diagram, there's 5 spaces in front of the building. One of them's an ADA space. That space is actually on the apartment side.
Okay.
My daughter actually will have a handicap van, so that's one of the reasons for it being on that side. She will probably use it more than anybody else will, but it'll be there and available.
And these lights, you said they're fluorescent tubes, like 4-foot fluorescent tubes?
No, just
No?
this.
Oh, the compact fluorescents?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned that the building is not illuminated to the point that it's...
Right, no, just
that
a
it's-
regular, like you have in the inside of the house, recessed light with a compact fluorescent screw into.
Okay. And what about lighting in the driveway?
I'm going to, if you look on that plan as well, I'm going to use landscape lights along the driveway to, with the lights.
These are the little low voltage ones that
Correct,
you have
yeah.
a picture of?
Yep.
In the winter, when you plough this driveway, or you plough for access to this garage, how do you do that?
I snowball it.
You snowblow it.
Mhm.
I mean, one of the things about those short little lights that are this high, that
Yeah, and the
a
winter I can
2-foot winter storm and they're gone.
Yeah. In the winter, I mean, obviously that would be a little more difficult to make use, but I was trying to keep it as little intact as possible as far as the lighting runs.
Okay. Just remind me from our previous hearing, what did we discuss, or what did we decide with regard, or didn't we, with regard to screening or landscaping?
We didn't really discuss a lot about it. I mean, there was some concern about some light shining onto the Owens property or driveway. And I proposed, I mean, I can put up a fence on that side if need be. I mean,
I'm really confused now.
Okay. Tell me about they've got the sign on the side of the building, and then you have a ground sign out front.
mhm.
Is that the lit sign, or is it just going to be a ground?
It doesn't have to be. Either way. I
Are
mean,
you requesting that it's lit?
not at this time, no.
Okay.
And that's going to be 10 foot high?
Well, that was, Brian and I actually talked about that. I mean, that's what the zoning regulation allows, but I think the 5 foot is probably more appropriate for that area.
Neighborhood, yeah.
Yeah.
How high off the ground?
5
5 foot?
Yeah,
And that's a 6 square foot sign.
correct.
Okay.
There again, maybe a little smaller. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the
whatever.
maximum that
Yeah,
the-
yeah.
that the residential area allows is 6 square foot.
To the left of the apartment, you have a dumpster.
Yes, I do.
What kind of dumpster is that? That's a sort of
2-yard.
2-yard triple T thing or something? Or,
Yeah,
is that in existence now? No.
yes.
It is?
Mhm.
Is it screened now?
No.
And it's just in the middle between the two buildings, between the house and the
Right now,
garage.
it's to the, let's see, to the north side of the building. It's on the side of the apartment side, where I've got a couple of parking spaces there. Right now, it's just sitting there, but it's on wheels. It can move wherever I need to put it, or Craig will move it wherever I need to put it.
We would ask that you either screen it or remove it, or move it from visibility from the street.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it goes on the side of the apartment, or you put up
I can put up
a small fence of some sort that hides it. I have one. You have to again remind me. I have one other question relating to the use, the conditional use that we approved at the last meeting. And what was the hours of the store?
Yeah.
Did we determine it? Six to eight? Was it 6 to 9?
Yeah.
Do you think you'll be going to 9? Most convenience stores.
Probably not.
Most convenience stores close either at 7 or 8.
Yeah. Probably not, but in the summertime it stays later, and you never know.
Okay. Any other members of the questions from members of the board? Spoon? Would any members of the public like to comment on this application? Please come forward.
Bob Stevens from Stevens and Associates. We've been asked by the Owens to take a look at this application and offer some comments on the application. I have a number of things. In fact, I think I've got a letter I'd like to submit for evidence, so maybe I'll pass that out and follow that as
Please do.
They're just to the south.
To the south.
Yeah.
That would be like right there.
Would that be the Owens driveway immediately behind the
To the south of
to the garage or the
That's correct.
accessory structure? Okay.
That would be right here.
I'd like, I would start by saying that there's a number of issues that, some of which I think can be addressed with how, whether the design is refined or cleaned up, but I basically put these things in 3 different categories. The first, actually, I think that there's an issue with respect to the principal use and principal building on a single lot. As I see section 2310, in the zoning, it requires or allows more than one building or one use in several districts. This property is in the RD and RR district, and it does not allow more than one principal building or one principal use. So, to begin with, as currently what it is an accessory structure, as a garage. Once that's modified into a mixed-use building, as an apartment and a neighborhood store, it becomes 2 principal buildings on a lot. And according to the ordinance, that would require either a subdivision into 2 lots or a PUD, which I think the PUD would probably be kind of tight and tough. So it seems that in order to have this use on the lot, in addition to conditional use, it would need a subdivision to put it on its own lot to start with. The second issue that we identified, I think it was mentioned at the last hearing, maybe it was more appropriate for site plan review, but based upon a boundary survey that's been done, this existing structure is at least a non-conforming structure according to the ordinance. It doesn't meet the setback requirement of the Owens property on the south. So that in and of itself, if you read the language, I think it's section 2410 that talks about continuation of non-conforming structures. You can continue that use, but it has prohibitions about expansions, enlargements, reconstructions. There are some exceptions. Most of the exceptions have to do with uses. There's only one exception having to do with a non-conforming structure, and that has to do with reconstruction, and if it's more than a 75% increase in value, that reconstruction is also prohibited. Again, you get this issue of a continuation of a non-conforming structure, and whether or not, well, as I say, it does seem to limit any expansion of that. I also, I'm not sure whether this is a non-conforming structure or a structure that's in violation. We didn't have a chance to go back and review this, but I believe the structure was built sometime in the last 10 years. I'm sure it had a permit. So if it was permitted with a plan that showed an appropriate setback, it's not built to that setback. It would be a building in violation, which sort of brings it out of the category of it's not even a non-conforming structure. It's a building in violation, and even with respect to the applicant's investment, I think that there's a concern on his part as well in terms of making an investment in a structure that then becomes a deed flaw if you go to sell it or do something in the future. This is an issue that probably should be addressed, and certainly should be addressed as part of this process before substantial investment is made in a building that would then be either in violation or non-conforming. So that,
Can I talk? I have a question for you. Do you know what the actual not the regulations, but what where the structure is in relation to the boundary?
The boundary plan that was prepared for the neighboring property is fairly small scale. I think in the applicant's site plan, he's showing it at 1.5 feet. Based on that information, it's either a foot or it's awfully close to even touching the boundary. One would have to locate the building a little more accurately with respect to the boundary line in the data. The setback requirement, this building is in the R rural residential district. So the side yard setback is 25 feet in this location.
I believe the building's in. Sorry, the lot is in 2 districts,
It is.
Yes.
and we can choose to take the lesser of the setbacks if we so wish.
Within 30 feet. If you look at the
Correct,
ordinance,
yeah.
it says you can move the line 30 feet. Now, the line's not shown on your sketch application plan. I think if you, based on my interpretation of the zoning, moving it 30 feet would still have the entire building in the RR district. So, and what the ordinance says is you can move it 30 feet and apply the least restrictive
Yep.
criteria within that 30 feet, provided that it doesn't alter the essential character of either district. And a setback is one of those things that, may be defining the essential character of the RR district. But in this case, I think in either case, the 30 feet I don't think will get you there. And even if it was the RD district, that's a 10-foot requirement, and you're at 1.5 feet. So it looks like in either case, you've got a non-compliant issue. Now, I'm not quite sure how you solve that sort of a boundary line agreement or moving the building, but concern to some degree is a perpetuation. And again, this is supposition on my part. I think maybe somewhat related to the next set of comments on the site plan. A lot of times in residential applications, we don't get the level of care in developing the site plans, and people make investments, things get built, not that they intend to have that, but if you don't know precisely where those lines are with respect to the building, even if you intended it to meet the setback, it wasn't built that way. And as we've seen historically, and I'm sure you guys have seen applications come back and say, I can't sell my house because it's too close to the setback, will you give me a variance? And often that can't be done if the applicant has created the condition. So it's a real quandary for people in terms of not getting things accurate and dramatic. And that level of accuracy actually leads to sort of the last category of issues. I've identified a series of site plan concerns on page 2 with a caveat that some of this is difficult to interpret because I don't believe that the plan that was submitted with your application is accurate or to the standards that we would see for site plan. It doesn't show the full extent of the impervious surfaces. It doesn't really accurately show all the boundary lines, and I'll speak to where I'm finding inconsistencies. I did scale it to get it to the scale that was shown. Some of the buildings are shown when you scale, they scale to their dimensions, but other dimensions do not. So it raises an issue as to whether this is really at a sufficiently laid out to make the set of decisions that are for you for site plan approval. So some of these issues that some are questions, some I think are issues. The parking on the south side that is adjacent to the south boundary, the one just to the east of the apartment and the store, it's tucked in behind the building. It's not clear to me where the topography is running at that point. Is there surface drainage that's going to have runoff water coming onto the Owens property? Is there room for snow storage? I think we'd like to see some screening from the neighboring property if that parking needs to stay there. But again, I'm not quite sure what's happening because there's not a lot of information. There's also not any existing vegetation shown, so we don't know whether that vegetation is there being removed or if there's something being proposed. Topographic data isn't shown, so it's a little difficult to know where the water's running and if it's going to run out there and where it's going to end up. I was able to sort of look and have some concerns about the parking circulation for vehicles, whether they can back out of those spaces and get turned around if the lot is full. Certainly the private spaces seem to be a little tough to do that. You've got certain standards for parking depths and aisle widths. Not sure that those are all met on this plan. Delivery trucks, circulation around the site, I think you've got a real issue with that. It's not clear to me that we've designed many sort of general stores. Sorry to say that deliveries come in tractor trailers. Don't quite know, and maybe that's not the case here, and I'm sort of reading into that what our experience is. But you might get a box truck in and out of that, but I think you're going to have to end up using Guilford Street to back into this lot and pull out. That section of street, that might be okay, but I don't think it's a great situation. I'm not sure you can meet the turning distances with a 16-foot driveway. Again, the pavement on Guilford Street is shown, so I don't really know whether you've got room to get a truck in and out of that and whether that can happen with all the cars being parked there. But it is an issue that would need to be anticipated. Likewise, the driveway at 16 feet probably isn't wide enough to have a car staged and have another car pull in next to it. That can be widened to 20, but 16 is certainly not there. Pedestrian systems, usually if you park adjacent to a building, you're going to need to leave some space for people to walk. There's an ADA accessible route requirement to the door, so there's going to be 5 or 6 feet needed in front of those cars somehow delineated, and therefore the cars are going to be pushed back deeper into the parking if you work that out correctly. And as a neighborhood store, we were wondering if there was a proposal for a pedestrian connection to the street. So neighbors might be able to walk there, but that's really just a question. Dumpster screening, we'd like to ask that it's screened not only from the street but from the neighbor's property, because the neighbor's house and their driveway actually goes up behind to the south of the garage and then up above this property. So the dumpster is shown on the site plan. There may be some vegetation around it, I can't tell, but it seems like there's some screening, and we didn't see any indication of a driveway, so I can't quite tell where the impervious areas are on the site plan. I assume it's gravel, and there's a delineation between pavement and gravel, but the gravel edges aren't shown. But there would need to be some impervious areas to get the dumpster back there. Landscaping, again, I think you mentioned it as well. Typically on a commercial public application, we see some landscaping to help buffer this into the neighborhood, whether that's on the public side or in screening and screening some of the parking lot. We didn't see any landscaping proposed. The lighting, there were some questions about lighting. It sounds like it's a reasonable proposal for recessed lights. In the cut sheet that was submitted with the application was not a recessed light and it was not a cutoff fixture, so we had concerns about that. And I think you might light, our experience is that a 10, 15-foot eave with downcast lighting, you're going to project out onto the site maybe about 15 feet, and then it's going to be quite dark further out. I agree that the landscape lights won't do a whole lot of light for visibility. You may have a bright spot and a dark spot out there You know, again, if you look at the standards we use for uniformity, you probably need some site lighting, downcast site lighting somewhere. Not a big concern. I don't think there's too much of it that's proposed, but the record ought to reflect to not use the cut sheet that was submitted, and that the lights are recessed as was verbally mentioned here. Coverage, we mentioned that it was a little hard to tell what the coverage was because not all the impervious areas are shown. I'm also not sure what standard to use, to be honest with you. In two different districts, the coverage requirements are different. The application mentioned 44%. Rural residential requires 35, RD 55, but I wasn't really able to assess that because it wasn't all there. I'll move down a little bit further. Boundary lines. I think that, and particularly in light of the building not meeting the current setback, knowing where the boundary lines are on this lot is essential. We do have a boundary plan for the neighboring property. In using that boundary plan, looking at the southern boundary line on this application, it's called out at 200 feet, and if I scale 200 feet along that boundary line, it puts the front boundary line only about 20 feet in front of this garage. So I don't quite know if the 55 feet is from the edge of the road or if it's from the property line, but the setback needs to be from the front boundary line. And it's not clear in this application where exactly that is. I mean, I know from the early 90s when Harold Mayhew subdivided this property, there were boundary surveys of record that if researched and tied into those pins, you could probably show that without actually doing a current boundary survey. But even the front yard setback, it's not clear exactly what that is given the application as it sits. So there's a few other items in there regarding existing vegetation. There was a note about seating. I'm not clear if that was an early idea that's gone away, whether that means that there's a restaurant in here which might change the parking requirements. I wasn't clear, again, in the application, how much parking would be required. It sounds like the store has gotten smaller, so the 5 spaces are probably adequate based on the parking demand that is currently being proposed. So, in essence, I think there's a couple of sort of jurisdictional issues. You've got the multiple uses, two principal buildings, 2 principal uses on a lot issue. You've got the non-conforming structure or structure in violation issue to deal with, and then a series of design issues that might be able to be addressed with a little more work and thoughtfulness. And we'd like to ask at least that if the site plan is going to be revised, that this stuff gets designed properly, laid out properly on a site plan, the opportunity to review it, because it seems hard to think that this will all get addressed by condition. Unless there's any questions,
I have a question. Why do you say that it's 2 principal uses as opposed to a principal and a secondary?
I think I interpret that as principal uses because they are separate uses listed under the ordinance. So and again, admittedly the ordinance is sometimes vague, but there are uses and accessory uses. If the second use on the site is accessory to the first, I would look at that as accessory. So for instance, the previous house with a garage, that's accessory, or even a business that has a second use that's accessory to the first. In this case, a neighborhood store is a commercial use listed under both of these zoning districts, as is the single-family home. A building that had an apartment building and the neighborhood store in it, I would look at that as one principal building and one principal use. So there's 2 uses in that building, but one sort of goes with the other as an accessory. But when you have a separate structure, single-family home, and a structure that's neighborhood store and an apartment building, that seems like it's 2 different uses. And the only reason I can think that that's in the ordinance has to do with the lot area coverage requirements. And it's a little bit of an end around if you say, oh, lots have to be a certain size for this use, and then you could put multiple uses on a single lot.
Thank you.
Can we just go back to the boundary, I won't call it conflict, but presumably at some point in time, and I don't know. There was a permit for that accessory structure or that garage, and it's just been constructed in the wrong spot, or that the boundary wasn't determined, or, I mean, you said that you felt that the boundary had been determined in recent history. We're not talking about something that hasn't been determined for many years.
I suspect, and again, I remember when the garage was built. I don't know how long ago that was, 10 years maybe? Was that right, Mike? About 10 years ago?
Well, a little longer than that.
Yeah.
Back when I built that garage, we were under the understanding, me and Mr. Owens, that the boundary was the edge of his driveway. Until recently, when he did a survey, was when it was discovered that it wasn't the end of his driveway. So that just happened just this last year. So the building's been there, it was built with the understanding that the boundary was the edge of his driveway.
I think what we find, and this again is a professional practice
So that
in
would
this
be
town, is that,
here.
we get wanting to allow homeowners to not go through the process of getting a boundary surveyor. We sort of accept an application that says, well, here's what we think it is. But then there's a substantial investment made and it's not there. Before the Owens survey, there was a survey done in the early 90s. In fact, we did a subdivision for Harold Mayhew on one of the back lots. Early 90s or late 80s was a boundary survey done. So that boundary was probably closer than, or reasonably determinable. But my assumption is that 10 years ago, whenever that garage was put in, an application was applied for by the town. The application was conforming. It showed a new building and it showed a setback to the boundary line. So the issue the applicant has is that the town approved that plan, presumably meeting the setback requirement, and in fact it was built and it doesn't meet it because it wasn't precisely known where that boundary line is. I'm not saying I'm sure it was not intentional, but the result is that you've got a structure that now has a flaw, that is a little difficult.
Well, it's just a pre-existing non-conformity. I mean, there are properties in this town, there are hundreds of them, where we have garages up against boundary lines, or even over boundary lines.
It's actually not a non-conformity, it's in violation. Technically, if the permit was issued with a 10-foot setback and it doesn't have a 10-foot setback, I believe you've got a building that's in violation of its permit. So, yes.
But I think what you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, is that at the time, or the applicant just said, at the time, the boundary was deemed to be in a different place.
No.
We have subsequently, well,
There was pins there and everything. It was deemed to be in a different place. Ken had a survey done. It wasn't there, it was different. We had this conversation with his surveyor, Eric Morris, when he did it. Ken and I and Eric sat right out there and Eric said, well, there's all kinds of them like that. And Brattleboro said, it is what it is, And that's kind of the way we left it, and that was last fall. So
The issue, the question.
10, 11 years ago when I built that, that's, the setback was off in this driveway, which is where we thought the property line was the whole time I'd been there since '95. So.
Question, did you speak with your neighbor before you constructed the building 10 years ago?
Oh boy, yeah, I mean, we've always talked back and forth about the property line and, deal that he made with Harold when Harold got that little piece of land and so forth. There was always conversation about it.
when was the garage built? 95?
97 was when 97, 98, I think is when I started that. I bought the property in 95.
Yeah, and as I say, in the early 90s, there was a boundary survey done of this property, all of Harold Mayhew's property, he subdivided those. And that boundary survey existed, so had the applicant hired a surveyor to say, where is my line, he would have had better information.
But there was a survey that you're aware of, or you think there was a survey that was available in 95?
Oh, I'm sure there was. In fact, we did a subdivision for Harold Mayhew on this property. I'm not sure if it was this lot or the lot behind this, and it was before 93, so it was the early 90s, and I remember doing it. I remember we prepared a boundary survey. And we were referencing a previous survey that had been done. So that existed. It's really just the standard of care. Applicants, they're showing a setback from a boundary line, and they haven't done the due diligence to find out where that line is. And I'm not pointing out Mr. Gouen in particular. Other people do this as well. He's right. That doesn't make it right. It's an unfortunate thing because then you can see the result. Homeowners end up making investments that are then non-compliant. But in either case, you've got a problem whether you, if you consider it a non-conforming structure, take that and say it's a pre-existing non-conforming structure. Our interpretation of the ordinance is you can't do this substantial of an improvement in a non-conforming structure. One thing to continue its use, add onto it as a garage if you want, but to turn it into a store and an apartment, that's a substantial improvement which is not allowed under non-conforming structures. That's our reading of the ordinance. So it really doesn't matter where you go.
This survey was provided to us
Yeah.
at the previous hearing, I believe. This is a recent survey, was it? I don't have my 2009. Any glasses?
It's from the
Yeah,
last
I didn't
meeting?
ask Eric how close the building is to the boundary line, but as you can see, it almost touches it on that plan. This again, you can see the 200 feet on that south boundary line from the corner pin, and that's where I measured from that back corner to the street, 200 feet, and found, again, something on the proposed application, which would put the front boundary line a lot closer to the building than the 55 feet are shown in the application. So again, the question is, where's the front boundary line? It's not, there isn't a, I don't interpret anything on the application's plan that shows the front boundary line, although I'm not sure the two lines for Guilford Street, if those are meant to be the street or the boundary. I don't think it scales at about 45 feet wide. I'm sure the street isn't that wide. So actually, I don't know what all that is. But again, this gets back to...
But Bob, your concern, I mean, you're raising a second issue there. Your concern is the setback to the Owens property rather than the setback from the street.
Both of them are concerning, because you don't really have data to know what they are. Setback to the Owens property, we know is less than 10 feet and it's certainly less than 25 feet. So it's certainly it's at least a non-conforming structure, and it may very well be a structure that's in violation of its permit. So those are two issues separate. And then I'm suggesting that I don't think you really know where the front boundary line is on this application.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question for Michael. Have you had it surveyed? Have you had this property surveyed recently?
Brian, is that original permit available?
I haven't seen the permit in his file for it, so I could check through the town clerk's office to see if it's been recorded, but I haven't done so.
Would any other member of the public like to speak to this application? Thank you.
I'm Ken Owens, and I'm the butter property owner. Mike is correct that I knew that he was building a garage, and I did assume, we both assumed that the property line was my driveway, but I never saw a survey of it. It was one of those things where Harold said, if you sell me this piece of property, I will help you put a driveway in next to it. And so that's how that happened without myself ever knowing exactly where the property line was. We took Harold's word for it, which is a mistake. But my concern is that, and a garage is one thing. I don't have a problem with having a garage there, but a business is a whole different proposal for us. I got an email from Eric Morris that I believe sent to you, Brian, about the prior uses of this garage, which was a towing business and a taxi business. And I believe you quoted him, or you were quoted as saying that you didn't see any difference in the usage of the store. And that to me doesn't make any sense, because the taxi business, you call somebody on the phone and they get in their car and go pick you up. His towing business was the same thing. It wasn't like these people pulling in and out of the property, with trucks or whatever. That's certainly a concern, that if it is true that you folks are thinking that it's the same usage as a store would be for a taxi and a towing business. So those are my concerns.
Thank you.
So it is, if I understand you then, the property line and the site of the building is not the issue. It's the use of the building.
Well, no, if it stayed a garage, I wouldn't have a problem with it being 1.5 feet from my property line, because we talked about that with Mike when we got the survey done. Maybe I'm wrong, but theoretically, I could have him move the building. And I'm not asking that. I can live with a garage. But turning it into a convenience store or whatever it's going to end up being, I have a problem with that.
Could you describe what your problem is? Is it noise?
Noise, lights,
And
traffic.
the noise you expect would come from trucks pulling in and
Well,
out?
that, I would assume if his plan on attracting people walking up and down the street, then if you look at other stores in town, especially on Canal Street, there's a lot of people hanging out in front of these grocery stores, these convenience stores.
But have you had that experience, or do you know any in stores in a rural area? Do people tend to hang out in front of them?
I don't know of another one in a rural area.
I have a question. You said it was a taxi business and a towing business. Was that in that garage before it became a garage or after it became a garage?
You'll have to ask Mike that.
What's that?
The garage, when it was put up, was originally put up, but it had two businesses in it already? Or,
I've run various businesses. I ran my own business from the time I moved in there.
okay. So
It's just,
when you put the garage in, you put it in not necessarily to park your own private cars, your own personal cars?
Yeah.
It was,
yeah.
it
my
was for
trucks and
business?
whatnot. Yeah, I wasn't doing any repair work or anything. It was just my own vehicles.
Okay.
It was just a big enough garage to park my flatbeds and whatnot for towing.
Okay.
What about the body shop you had in there?
I let somebody work in there for about 3 months trying to help them out.
We're not really concerned with the prior uses of the property. I mean, anybody within that district can operate a business, either a permitted business or a conditional business. As was stated at the previous hearing, we have plumbers and other businesses up and down that street. Now,
So my concern with that was saying that the usage is not any more with the convenience store than it was as a taxi and towing business.
well, again, we wouldn't consider the usage. If the business is conforming, then permitted. I beg your pardon. Then the occupant or the owner of that site can use that. And if it's a conditional use, which a neighbourhood store or a grocery is, then, as was granted at the last hearing, the applicant can choose to switch. It's up to the applicant or an applicant to apply, choose to switch to that use, and the board would consider it and grant permission one way or the other. What's been raised today is issues with regard to setbacks, conformity, and a conforming site plan. Much of which is valid, and then for me, we have either a non-conforming building or a building that's in violation of one element or another of the ordinance, and I'm attempting to determine the relevance or the pertinence of that. Well, if it's a taxi business or a trucking business or a plumbing business or an electrician's business or a general store or a neighborhood store, if it's permitted in the book, then
I appreciate you explaining that.
yeah, we're not looking to say, well, the taxi business had 10 visits a day and now we're going to go to 12, or 20 or 50. Thank you.
Question from Mr. Goodwin, actually. If, in fact, this is non-conforming and not in violation, then the problem comes up that you're limited in terms of how much money you can spend to improve it. And we don't have any data at all on how much money you're going to spend to improve it, or what the current value of that building is. I think if we're going to okay it, assuming that it's just out of conformance and not in violation, we would need those figures in order to be able to.
The tax department doesn't have it separate either on my property tax bill.
But we would need it, I think. I don't know whether the rest of the board agrees with me or not, but it seems that we would need to know the value of that building and the money that you're going to spend to fix it in order to know whether we could legally okay it or not.
Okay, I mean, do we know what the percentage is?
75% of the current value of the building.
Brian, at our previous hearing, we talked about where the transition between the two zoning districts occurred, and I seem to recall a funny comment along the lines of, well, the map is the map.
Exactly.
With regard to what setbacks apply with this structure and this boundary, if it's more than 30 feet outside of the rural residential, is it? I'm going to get the two mixed up now. Did you? I mean, I guess the question is, at the time of the application, have you had a chance to review where that district lies and what the change in district lies in relation to the structure? My recollection was that at the last meeting or the last hearing, we went, well, this is where the line is showing in the map. Mm-hmm. The structure doesn't appear to be less than 30 feet, and Mr. Stevens has just raised the point that he thinks the entire building is considerably more than 30 feet out. Please, yeah, step up and.
Sure, how relevant it is.
So, again, if you were to ask a topographic or boundary surveyor, you're stuck with interpreting your zoning map, which is a very large scale, and putting it on a site plan and showing that boundary. But if you look at in the application, some of the supporting data was showing the zoning boundary. The best you can do is look at the parcel lines, and if you look on the easternmost edge of this parcel, the zoning boundary comes at the intersection of it's essentially a corner of this parcel map.
Do you have the map number there? Just to.
Let me show you what I don't know. That's what I downloaded from the website.
Map 3.
I don't know. This is what was on file.
Oh, okay.
So you can see where the shaded, these are the two, this is the zoning boundary. That shaded line comes right into this corner here.
Yeah.
So what I interpreted is this line coming east-west right through there, and there's your front building.
I think once more here we have a discrepancy, because the maps that we work from here, which are not the ones you downloaded, show, I recall from the last meeting, show it in a different place.
Oh, could be. I don't know. This is what was in the application.
Because it's hard to tell on this.
This is your GIS map? Do you think this is different
I think the way to go with it would be to, go this from Maps Online.
Yeah, I didn't go
The
back
problem
and
was the
look at this.
footprints were digitizing properly on that property, so we've been using the orthophotos.
Ultimately, it's the map, there's a master map in your office, I think. Right? So these are all taken from that.
How are we going to determine whether this is in violation?
I have no idea.
I'm trying.
James is researching it.
I don't think we can resolve it until we make the determination. I hate to say it.
Michael, do you have any other comments? Yes, sorry, Spoon, go ahead.
Another question. Could you remind me, is your property in the proximity of the school that's up that way, that Montessori school? Is it pretty close to that school?
Well, no, not really. I mean, it is and it isn't. I mean,
Oh.
The school is way up on the hill, and so for the old property, yes.
But the entrance to the school is nearby?
Down the road is south of me.
I just, what is the distance from that, do you think, from your property to the entrance of that school?
To the entrance or to the Summit Circle
The entrance
Road?
from the road, at the drive, up, from, say, from your driveway to the driveway that leads up
To the
to the
road that
school.
leads up to the school,
No,
Summit Circle?
well, not to Summit Circle, it would be to the entrance to the school. So that's your
Not
question.
to the, I'm just wondering, at my point, that school is a fairly small school, like 30 or 40 students?
No, there's 100 and something.
Oh, it's 100 and something. And how do they arrive every day?
Parents,
Mostly parents?
all parents. There's
All
no busing.
parents.
Yeah.
So that was, and most of them probably arrive with one, sometimes two students in a
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
So that probably brought in at least 60, 80, 100 cars every morning.
Every morning and every afternoon.
If you added, and then you would have at least that many more in the afternoon.
Mhm.
So, and how would that compare to the amount of traffic that might be in and out of your store?
The school traffic is way more than I'll ever get in and out of the store. You know,
Spoon, we actually have already considered the conditional use and granted it at our last hearing. What we're considering today was site plan approval, because we had insufficient data at our last meeting, and Mr. Stevens has raised some issues in relation to site plan, one of which is the non-conformance or violation of the structure because of its proximity to the boundaries, which are really, from all the data that we have, somewhat difficult to determine based on.
Yeah, I realize that. I guess the problem I'm having is that the issue seems to be the noise that will be created by the store. But there was never a noise issue raised with the school, and which seems to be many times more, except that the school would have fewer trucks. It has a few fuel trucks, food trucks, school buses, maybe small ones. And so I'm trying to understand, because although we're looking at technically the boundary, but the problem I'm having is that this building, this structure hasn't moved. When it was proposed, the two landowners discussed its placement before it was built and agreed that it was okay to place the building there. That was when there was a different understanding, of course, what the building would be. Now, time has passed, and there is a new use proposed, and now the property line becomes an issue. And I'm just having trouble trying to consider this issue at this time as a property line issue rather than a use issue. Period.
That's why I brought up that, what I said before, was that up until this point, it has always been apparently non-compliant, regardless of whether it was a taxi or whether it was a towing or whatever. It was not supposed to be there, but they agreed on having it there. So, I agree with Spoon that all of a sudden, it's not compliant anymore. The use isn't.
Jump in.
Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
It really doesn't matter if the neighbors have agreed to the location of the garage in the past. Land development in Brattleboro has to conform to the Brattleboro zoning code. It does or it doesn't. And it's great that hasn't been conflict between the neighbors about this, but you can't move forward unless it's in conformance.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please, please.
Just put an exclamation mark on that. We've seen cases where, regardless of what people thought or their intentions, they get ready to sell a piece of property and they can't close because it doesn't comply. So this is a big issue. It needs to comply with the ordinance. Otherwise, you've got an asset or a real estate asset that can't be transferred. So best intentions aside, it really doesn't make that much difference. And I think to go back to our letter, I don't think we mentioned anything about noise or use. All of these issues, and they're really, as I say, three different categories. One was this property line issue, one was the principal use, two principal uses on a lot, and then there's a whole series of just site plan issues that need to be cleaned up to know that it's going to function properly and conform. So they are technical, but they're important when you get to again, a higher level of commercial publics coming into this property now, using this as opposed to a residential lot. Those are the standards that we usually see for site plans commercially, and that's why we've identified them as concerns. Not the use, not the noise. That I think you did address at the last meeting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm having trouble with on this whole thing? Why didn't we have more time on this?
We can take more time.
I mean, this is the last minute. We get this. We haven't even seen it until now. I don't get a chance to go through the book and check things out for myself. Why are we taking in information that we're getting in at the last minute when this has been up before for a month? That's what's bothering me.
Okay.
I could respond to that as well. As an applicant, and you're right, you get it at the last minute, but the applicant, there was additional information that gets online, and we're at the end of the chain as you are. So for us to offer comments, we have to wait till the final data is submitted to you for this hearing. It gets online, and we pull it down, and we have to review it and then get our responses out. So we're a little bit at the end of the trail as well, and that's why you get the...
Yeah, but I mean, this is too late. I mean, we get it at
Sure.
at 7:15 at night, and the meeting starts at 7.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I would understand if you'd want to take more time with it.
that's what I'm really... Yeah, but why does he have to have this problem because you're giving us information that's counterproductive afterwards? It's late.
I'd like to correct that. We just got his application information last week. So it's late, yes, it's late getting out, but it's only because we've just received his latest submission. We don't get his submission the same time you do. So we're just responding timely to what we got in the middle of last week. That's the reality we have to deal with as butters. We don't get this information.
Yeah.
Yeah, please step up, yeah.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Stearns, a neighbor, and something you said a little earlier raised a question for me. So perhaps it's something that your group would want to deliberate or research or look into. You were asking Mr. Lewin about his hours, proposed hours.
Yep.
And And you said, well, you know, most convenience stores are usually closing around 7 or 8. And actually, a convenience store is different from a neighborhood store, and it raises the question, actually, which is it? It's being called a neighborhood store because that's an allowed variance. But the definitions that I've gotten from the town are actually, it might be something you want to clarify at some point in the future, because they're, for example, a convenience store is characterized by a quick shopping trip.
I think if I had said convenience store, it was a slip on my part. The applicant has applied for a neighbourhood store, and we considered a neighbourhood store at our last hearing, and we are still considering a neighbourhood store. I was trying to, when I asked him, I couldn't recall, not having the notes here, what we had discussed with regard to hours and therefore the relevance of lighting. I was looking at it from a lighting perspective. If we're open considerably late, then, or much, much later, then you may consider that lighting is more important. You know, I mean, I understand that
I think it just,
in the winter, obviously, we're dark at 5 o'clock or something, but...
I think it just raises the question of somewhere down the line that may have to be figured out, not necessarily here, and not in this application, but just what defines...
The difference between the two?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I don't see how we can vote on this until we know whether this is a violation or not. And then if it's not a violation, then we have to apply the 75% rule, and we don't have the data that we need in order to be able to do that. So I think my personal feeling is we need to have more data before we can...
So continue the hearing for 30 days to the next meeting?
That would be my preference, yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Michael, do you have anything else to add to the application? Or to add any other comments relating to issues raised by the board or by members of the public?
I guess only one thing, you're talking about whether it's in violation. What do you mean by that?
Whether what you built at the time you built it conformed to what was on your permit. Because if you built something that was different from what you were permitted to do,
No.
then it would be a
I got a
violation.
permit for a garage way back when.
But where it was placed,
Yeah.
was it placed where the permit said?
Mhm.
And we have your word for it, but we also have the
Right.
question raised as to whether it really was.
Mhm.
And I have no idea how one gets a hold of a copy of that.
Well, it'll be on file. It'll be
on file.
recorded. So I think the consensus of the board will be that we'll continue the hearing for 30 days with the following in mind, that we establish some more data with regard to this application, and the data will be relating to that structure, relating to the boundary lines, relating to establishing the setbacks, and Brian, also where the transition occurs between the two zoning districts. You may have to, I would suggest that you look at getting your own survey done to confirm the boundary line. Certainly when you were issued a permit originally, it would appear, although we don't have the documents before us, that the permit was for a conforming structure and the setback was determined from a line that was somewhere on a plat of some description, and that presumably you felt that it was being built in a legal and correct manner. It's not necessarily for us to determine, as a board, whether what was right back then is correct now. But what we would like to get is the data to show that to show us where we stand now, or where you stand now. Certainly, we could move forward and issue, with some we could issue an approval for a neighbourhood store with the site plan with modifications, but you yourself may not wish to go ahead and invest the money in converting that store or doing that business there if there is a fundamental issue that's not resolved.
But we still got to deal with the 75% amount of the current value of the building. That is the maximum that he's allowed to spend to do the improvements that he wants to do. And, and in fairness to him, we should give, if in fact the board agrees that we need that information, then we need to know what we're going to accept from Mr. Goulin as to what those values are.
How long ago was that built again?
97,
97, 98, that's when I started it.
12, 13 years. That's what you do.
I mean,
Were you
it's a
using
work in
that?
progress, so it didn't all happen at once.
Was there anything there before?
No. I poured the slab sat there for 2 or 3 years. Or
When did you
whatever.
pour the slab?
What's that?
When did you pour the slab?
I'm thinking it was in the late 90s, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
I'd like that information. This seems really complex to me, because you might have an issue of him acquiring that property by adverse possession. And I don't know how that works in this case. And I'm not that comfortable with the conclusion that when a building permit was submitted and the abutters were notified and the town issued the permit and it was built to that permit, if there was a mutual mistake on the boundary, that it's necessarily a closed book. I realize you guys both say that, but I'd like to see some law on it.
Yeah.
And if anybody can dredge that up, I tried to, but I just couldn't. I'm not saying either of you are wrong or that he's right. It's just, I'm sure it's happened somewhere, and I'd like to see something authoritative on it. So that's just what's going on in my mind if we continue this.
Brian, when is the meeting in January? January the
16th.
16th? I think we should continue it.
No, the 18th.
18th?
16th's a holiday.
Right.
It's a Wednesday, right?
And I won't be here.
I'm looking for a motion to continue application 2011-129 to January the 18th.
So moved.
Yeah,
Second.
I have a question
Sure.
about the 18th.
Oh,
We will have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who heard this. Well, somebody can go over the tape.
they can watch the tape, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a motion, did I get a second there?
Second.
Seconded, thank you. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
So,
I'm voting
motion
opposed.
against? Okay, motion to 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion to continue 411 to January the 18th. Michael, we need some more information. Thank you. Okay. I call application 2011-245.
I'm voting down on the information that we got tonight, late. So as far as I'm concerned, it's approved.
Even though the law is, we didn't happen to be aware of the regulation.
Can you come to the chair?
They had enough time. We
Yeah,
had
okay.
enough time. What we could have accomplished
We have,
last Friday.
we have a short recess.
It's going to be a problem.
Yes, it is. We have a
This.
a 2-minute recess.
This to us, bringing information at the last minute. I don't like it.
No, the intuition.
Well, it's been good. They have 6 months.
Please tell us about your application.
I'm speaking. My name's Judith Brownell.
Hi, Judith.
I'm speaking today. Sorry, I'm cold. The building is it's a very large Victorian house. What happened was the entire second floor was a very, very large space. And she's actually changed part of that into a fourth addition. There are currently, this is on the first floor, which is classified as a home occupation. There is an apartment in the far back, which is being rented out right now.
Yeah, no.
And Susan is living in the back of the first floor. In the second floor, she's created a fourth apartment, and it has she's received an occupancy for, which is part of the package. Oh, yeah. I don't know if it looks yellow on yours. It's the last page. Fire prevention. The fourth apartment it's a small apartment. It goes upstairs and downstairs. And the entrance is on the side porch on the first floor. There's a very small kitchen and a full bathroom. The second floor has 2 rooms, one of which can be used as a living room and one as a bedroom. And the first floor is a large room which can be probably used as a living room and a bedroom. So that apartment has been created in the past 6 months, and she just very recently got the occupancy permit, as you can see, on November 17th, 2011. The second floor of the building has an extremely large space, which Susan she prefers to be known as Susan. She is thinking of making that into a bed and breakfast. It It has 2 large bedrooms, a full living room, a dining room, a full bathroom, and what they used to call in the old days a pantry, attached to the kitchen. It has a separate entrance. We recently had replacement windows put in, which your pros and cons on it. And I don't know if you have questions about the parking
What?
of the bed and breakfast.
No, no, no. So what?
I'm sorry. Well, there's the little room which I call the pantry can probably also be used as a bed if it becomes a bed and breakfast.
So you're before us tonight because you want to make a change of use to to put a better brain.
It's a permitted use in this zone, which is the urban, it's called the urban center. It's a permitted use. Susan spoke to William Hayes, who has he's the owner of the bed and breakfast on Main Street, Artist Law, and we discussed the bed and breakfast goes under innkeeper's laws rather than landlord tenant laws. And he discussed his business with us, and we found out that he uses, his clients use all off-site parking. He uses the town of Brattleboro parking garage for his, it's an inn, they call it, they don't call it tenants, his customers use that. And for a bed and breakfast, I think the owner is allowed to use the space as living space, and when your customers come in, you simply leave the space in the space. But it is a permitted use in that district. So if the parking is an issue, we're allowed from the parking garage, and we could certainly buy spaces there for the clients to use, especially in the wintertime. The building, I don't know if you've seen it, the driveway is very, very long. And
Yep.
there is parking in the back for about 6 vehicles.
6.
Yeah, she doesn't use the parking lot in the winter, basically because there's somewhat of a liability with snow sliding from the roof onto the driveway. You see the building is a very long building. The driveway is also very long. There's a slate roof. And there's the issue of like snow sliding off onto the driveway. So what we do in the winter is we basically do not use the driveway at all. And we simply use the town parking garage, which is about a block away.
The driveway is on the north side of the building, is that right?
Well, yes, it's on the north side, yes.
Okay.
And there's a parking lot in the back. She said, I think she said, hold it up.
I need to see better plan.
Ron, we're doing site plan approval.
We're
We're not,
okay. So the issue of not having enough parking will really not be an issue at all.
We're planning on using the parking lot just for the year-round tenants and residents, and the B&B people will give them a couple of parking spaces and just give them tickets like they do down at the Artist Loft B&B.
And I understand for bed and breakfast, the Department of Health has to do a walkthrough. It's got a fully functioning bathroom, a fully functioning kitchen, very large space.
Now, you're not changing the exterior of this structure. I mean, we're not. There's
The
no.
exterior will not be changed.
It's internal changes only. Yeah.
Yeah, it was basically, it has always been a living space, I believe, for as long as the building has been in existence. It'll be simply changing it into a bed and breakfast.
So you're going to change one apartment or some of the apartments into a bed and breakfast.
Actually, I guess
One.
it would be one apartment would be changed entirely into a bed and breakfast.
Big one in the front upstairs.
And there is a sign outside, which is 4x4.
2x2.
Sorry, 2x2. And if we need a sign for the bed and breakfast, it could simply be added onto that sign.
We apply for another 2x2, which will go above the other, one above the other.
So we have to come before the zoning administrator and apply for another sign.
No, we don't, we're right here.
We're doing it now, sorry. I guess I didn't read it carefully enough, sorry.
I don't know, if we need a walk through, because
No,
it's supposed to be a permitted use.
No, the department of health now says.
What are our issues here?
I'm trying to determine that.
Yeah.
Can you tell me?
Well, you can ask the
I don't actually.
So, can you summarize, can you just summarize? Well, I mean, we're here, you're here to do site plan approval. Okay, the use is permitted. You can take one of those apartments and turn it into a bed and breakfast. We're not going to have an issue with that. It's a permitted use. Parking, you can't put any more parking in than you already have. If you have guests there, I don't know how many beds you've got in your bed and breakfast, you're going to have to park them somewhere.
Yes.
Somewhere. And that can be in the town parking spaces, wherever, or in your own parking at the back if you can use it. The fire inspector, or the Chief Bucossi, or the town, Peter Lynch, the town Brattleboro Fire Department, will wish to, as they do with apartment buildings, will wish to inspect, or you should have them inspect, your bed and breakfast facility, whatever that may be.
It's fine, Mr. Lynch has been through a lot, but that's fine.
The electric work was done a couple of years ago, and it was completely permitted, right?
We're not considering your electric work, your
Right.
plumbing work.
You just need to get the endorsement from the fire chief.
Correct.
Yes.
I'm curious, so you're going to put a sign up that says something bed and breakfast?
Yes, I mean, I understand with these businesses, you sort of have to build up a clientele, so we may give cards out at some of the stores downtown and this.
Do you know where the sign is going on your building?
Yes, there's already an existing sign in the front, and it'll be, the actual 2x2 for the bed and breakfast will be added onto that. It's a long, has two long posts, and you
Yep.
have the possibility of putting several signs in between posts.
Okay.
It'll be, right now there's a law office sign, it's gonna be, the B&B is gonna go on top, and the law office is gonna go left.
What's the law office?
Is that-
What's the law office that's there? What's the name of it? I'm just curious.
Well.
I can't remember this
Part
building.
Bishop, which was Brownlow and Rockwell, but now we're individual, which is Judy Brownlow and Susan Rockwell.
Brownlow won't be on. If you walk down that, you see the sign.
Could you provide the zoning administrator with with details of the sign? And the sign will have to conform to.
Yeah, we can.
Have you done that already?
Well,
Have you done that already?
They've already approved the sign that's there, which is 2x2 on either side. So what we applied for, they said that you have to apply if it's like a new use for sign, so we need we're gonna get a new sign, which is also 2x2. Because they said we have another business, they allow another. So we're gonna move the law office sign down, there's the exterior one, the sign is like green, like wood, okay? We're just gonna move the law office sign down to the next, we're gonna put another 2x2 square under the current one. We'll move the law office sign down to the second one, put a B&B sign up at the top, on both sides. So it's just a straight sign about, with 4x4s, about maybe the top of it might be 10 feet high. And it's kind of nice, it's just green with kind of a
Okay.
19 Elm Street.
We just need you to
It looks like
give some details of that sign to the zoning administrator, so that we know that it conforms.
Another picture of it. So it
because
comes,
the Form B is not a system.
the current sign conforms, and all it's gonna be is another square 2x2 right side underneath the other one.
Is this combined square footage of 8 is the rule here?
4 square feet.
I have to look it up again.
Oh. So the combined is 4? It's not 4 for 1 and a combined 8 for 2?
2x2, 2x2.
Wait, are you telling me what it is or what you think the regulation is?
With the sign,
Are you describing your sign or are you telling me what you think the rules are?
I'm just.
She's describing her sign.
Currently, a 2x2, which was been approved, and Julie said that if we get another business, we can have another 2x2 sign, and the place to put it will be right under the other one, because
Yep.
the sign is narrow, we can't put it to the side of the other one. So, I didn't look up the rule.
Oh, she has a picture of it.
I do know that some places, the signs in town are much bigger than 2x2.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
filled out for me on both sides, so she has a picture of the sign.
Yes.
Okay, very good. The zoning administrator just needs to approve the sign permit, that's all, because you're adding a sign. You're adding another board of some sort, I guess.
Yes, and we applied for it in this one, didn't we?
Well, it looks like it's on.
It's fine.
He wants to have this.
You want it separate or not?
And what about the rest of the site? Are you making any changes on the rest of the site? No landscaping changes, no lighting changes, no parking lot changes?
We asked for some lights to sign that, but I think we might have got permission before for lights, but we didn't put them up, but just in case we wanted. No parking, no nothing, no. We've already made a lot of changes in the house. In terms of,
Fencing, screening.
in terms of like, the fire department wanted like individual doorways in, stuff like that, each apartment. And, so we defined the different apartments, if you will. So this apartment, you go into a room off the board, and you go up an interior stairway, to 2 rooms with antique pine floors, and then there's a little dining area, and a little kitchen area, and then, and kind of cute little bathroom, in an area that used to be just a loft, not a loft, what do you call it? It was just wasted space, it was a landing, it was just wasted space, and so we created this little kitchen area and bathroom area in that landing. So, because previously, if we had one tenant in there, and any part of that second floor, we'd be like stuck with not having just one person just about on the whole floor. This way, at least it's divided into 2 parts, so it's, you know, so they don't have to share a bathroom anymore, so we can.
She's talking about the front of the.
Okay.
What about the second floor used to be so huge, that was ridiculous.
We're comfortable with your use of the building internally. What we're just determining is a site plan, and your drawings here are a little
Sketchy.
sketchy. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a new term, sketchy. It would be nice if we could have something slightly better than that. Maybe you could work on the back off of this. Yeah.
We'll do a better job on it. I was just kind of in a hurry to meet that time.
The deadline? So can I ask you to improve your sketches? I'm not interested, or we're not interested in how you've divided the building inside and which rooms are with which in the bed and breakfast, or which rooms are in which apartment. The fire chief will be interested in that because he's looking at it from a safety perspective.
Right.
We this board do not consider that. If you meet his requirements, that will be fine. But for us, can you work with Brian, the zoning administrator? We need the property lines which are shown here, the outline of the building, the setbacks,
Yes.
where you're going to place the sign,
Yes.
and simple information like that.
Okay.
Your curb cut,
Okay.
that's it.
Okay, I just want you to know, we're probably all set on all that stuff because we got a really good survey when we bought the house by, what is it,
SVE.
Yeah, SVE. And I was a little concerned about the driveway, that it wasn't quite right. And when some other people were doing surveys around there, when the HCRS guy did the survey, he located the granite rock that separated the driveways right, the driveways right. So our survey was dead on.
So you can utilize that information that you have from SVE and submit it with the location of the sign and other bits and pieces to Brian.
Okay, the survey's in the clerk's department, but you want another
We need
copy of
a
it or what?
site plan.
Site plan. Okay. Like I
Other-
said, nothing's changing on the outside.
Okay.
No landscaping changes, right?
It's already landscaped, it's got a nice side yard.
But you're not gonna change anything because of what's happening here.
No, you had 2 huge trees removed out there where the
1-foot leaves that were brushing the house.
Personally, I'd rather through. I mean, it's a sketchy map, as you say, but if it's all internal and there's no external changes, I don't think we're going to learn that much more about parking and traffic flow from a nicely
I don't
drafted
even
map.
want people parking in the back, just for like, probably just for the year-round tenants, like the guy in the back of Parliament and us, and the B&B people can park in the town garage.
Okay.
That's just my opinion. I've thrown it
I think it
out
could be
there.
a little cleaner. Just a
Oh,
little.
yeah. I think it could be a lot cleaner. I don't disagree with you there.
Oh, you don't need a sketch of the internal part.
No.
One thing that might make it a little more clear is, in that drawing, there's a middle, see, there are 3 stairways to the upstairs of the house. In that drawing, you can see a middle stairway which joins the 2 drawings of the front back front. And I tried to indicate.
Ma'am,
Okay, we're good.
we're clear.
We're clear. I'm looking for a motion to approve application 2011-245.
So moved.
Second. Those in favour?
Yep.
Anyone against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 0, 1. You're good to go. Thank you.
Great,
Approved.
thank you so much. So you issue a decision?
Great.
We will, yep.
That's terrific.
Okay, great.
I like your email address.
So you don't need any more drawings? I know you like my artwork, but.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to do
I would
some-
prefer a slightly cleaner plan, that's all.
I'm gonna do that.
But just work with Brian
I'd like to see a
to
letter from the fire chief.
and you will we'll put a note in there that you'll have to get the fire chief to
Yes.
sign off on it.
No problem. Fire safety already did. They usually work
No,
very closely
that
with
is-
fire
Yep.
safety.
Okay, looking for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second, thank you.
Fire
All those in
chief did
favour?
not approve
Done.
the bed and breakfast.